It's thanks, Wilson. You've been working out again, haven't you, brother? Always, huh? Thank you. Well, a couple of things I want to announce before we get into the message this morning. First of all, I mentioned last week, and many of you know that Yoka, our dear sister, passed after having hip surgery, and it was unexpected. She passed the next morning after the surgery, and so there is I have the information here somewhere, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. There's a celebration of life for her that her daughter requested we would announce, and so we want to do that. Hopefully, we'll put it on, if it's not already on the Facebook page, certainly the Women of Southlake page. But it'd be good, guys, if anyone hearing my voice can help out with this, to put that on Facebook if it's not already there. And but it's Friday, this coming Friday, March 11th, if I have my dates right, at 11 a.m. at New Song Church in Northeast Portland on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So 11 o'clock Friday morning, New Song Church, Yoka's. And my understanding is that Will is going to have, it's going to be another family celebration of life for her later on, and I think that's still being planned. So thanks for your continued prayers for the family there. We appreciate that. The other thing I want to mention is just, we haven't talked about the Christmas offering, and I've gotten some questions this last week. Well, how much came in? And so, some of you are sitting on the edge of your seat every week waiting for the announcement. Just kidding. About right around, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but $280,000 came in through your generous giving. So thank you. There's so much that we're already doing that we're going to be able to get done because of that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, as always. You just continue to step up each and every year. I think as we've moved into March now, to be faithful, and the council will appreciate this, meets regularly to go over our finances. If you don't give regularly, this would be a good time to start again. January and February, which are typically financially challenging for most churches, have been a little extra challenging this year for us. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I'm sure. And we trust the Lord. What we preach, we try to live. And yet at the same time, the drop-off. See, the thing about the Christmas offering, which is awesome, but that's mostly already spoken for. So the things that keep the doors open, lights on, and for us to be able to do what we do is because of your generous giving throughout the year. So thank you for all of it, any of it, whatever God leads you to do is what we do together. We trust Him to make ends meet, and we will, and make things work. But just know that it's if you're waiting for something, now would be a good time to not wait anymore. Did that come across okay? All right, good. I think one of the didn't plan on saying this. One of the things that the Lord's using with COVID is, and this can seem sobering to many pastors, and I find it, I find it many things, but you see who's in. You find out through it all people that are wanting to move forward in the kingdom, at least in local churches or expressions of the local church who still believe the local church, Jesus in the midst of His church, is the hope of the world. And so it's, that's one of the things that's cool about this year's Christmas offering. There's a lot of people that are in with what we're doing and where we're going. And so, but that's also reflected in every month giving as well. So again, we've done well the last 2 years. I'm thankful. We've made it, and that's doing well. Doing well is churches making it and still doing what they're doing. But you, apparently enough of us still believe this is worth doing, what we're doing. I believe that. I know a lot of you believe that. So let's keep doing it, okay? Let's do what God's called us to do together in every way. Amen. Well, thank you, Lord. Well, I often start my messages with confessions. If you're new to Southlake Church, it won't be any surprise to you. I found it really, this sadly didn't, I just got here not too long ago. Worship had already started. And this Now, by the way, I'm still dealing with long COVID. Thank you for your prayers for me. Just know that I'm going to blame everything for at least the next year on long COVID. I'm finding that that's working very well for me. So I'm going to be totally healed of it long after I let you know. So just so you'll have some mercy. You always have a lot of mercy. But so this weekend, for multiple reasons again, I got behind. And I was like scrambling. So even this morning, I'm like, I looked at my watch and I could not believe what time it was. It's like, is this spring forward or something? Doesn't that happen next weekend? Is that this weekend? I mean, I'm just like, whoa. And so I'm like scrambling. And then I realized, not all that long ago, I realized, oh, we're talking about Mary and Martha this morning. If you don't know what it is, you're going to see by the end of the message why that's kind of funny, sad, because I'm like Martha, not Mary. And that's true many times in my life. It's, just scrambling to make things happen and get it done at the end of the day, being overly busy. I mean, COVID was a gift in just a very few ways, really, but one of the ways was it forced us, at least for a while, to slow down a little bit, breathe, as we did earlier together. And but you need to know, your pastor is preaching, not to you, but I'm speaking to you. I'm preaching today more from pain than from gain, more from process than perfection, you might say. Okay, I'm definitely in process in this area of my life. So with that confession, let's look today at Mary and Martha. The encounter is at the end of Luke 10, and we'll read it in just a few minutes. It's a very brief story. But what's interesting about this is that it's very common. It's not dramatic. So we've been studying through the events of the book of Luke, learning through the lives of the disciples, the eyes of the disciples. What would they have learned? What would have been the lessons? And so many of the events, so many of the things that happen have been dramatic. There have been, miracles and healings and deliverances from demons and transfigurations and Moses and Elijah. And, they've been doing it. Jesus sent them out to do it. I mean, all of these dramatic things. Even Mary and Martha, who show up several times in the life of Jesus, experienced dramatic Jesus events, miraculous. Their brother Lazarus was raised from the dead. But this event that we're looking at today is not that. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. It's the only places in the Bible is Dr. Luke, the historian, felt like it was significant historically. He wrote the book of Acts. Important that this was in there. Obviously, the church fathers did too. But there's a lesson here that's really, really important. I know for me that it's, significant even this weekend. And hopefully it will be in some sense for you as well as we look at this today. But one of the things I'll tell you right up front that this means, and again, we'll read it in a second, it's not usually the big events of your life where your character is forged. It's not. Those places reveal who you are. They don't make you who you are. Isn't that true? In the mundane and the hustle and bustle of life, Martha, who I kind of picture as the original Martha Stewart. She sort of was probably making lavender placemats out of like yak hair or whatever they used. I don't know. That's how I picture Martha. She was a leader. She was the one who owned the house where they have the dinner. She was the one that, was always kind of leading and charging ahead, and that was Martha. It was Mary who found time to focus her attention in spite of the big events, in spite of the distractions, in spite of the opposition. And she finds time to get away and find focused attention at the feet, give her focused attention at the feet of Jesus. She does it in the mundane, and that's what makes Mary great. So Mary took time to sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to Jesus' word. Before we get it, I want to give you 3 myths when it comes to busyness in general. Here's number 1, and there's a lot of fill-ins today if you're a fill-in person. Number 1 is there's not enough time to do something. That's a myth. By the way, you know what a good synonym for myth is? Lie. And why don't you just see which one of these 3 perhaps has affected you the most? I've got my favorite. But there's not enough time to do something. How many of us have thought, I wish there were more hours in a day? How many of us have secretly, like on Spring Forward Sunday, which is next Sunday, I think, have thought, man, I wish that was like every day, that I just had that extra hour, which we don't really have, but you know what I mean. But here's the truth. There's always enough time to do what God has called you to do. Always. What he has planned for your day, there's enough time to do what he has planned. Number 2, it's just a busy season right now. Or I'm just in a busy season right now. That's my favorite. How many of you would raise your hand and say, yeah, that's your favorite too? Yeah. The myth, the lie that I know I tend to believe is, well, when I just get through this season, then things will things will settle down, things will get back to normal, whatever that is. I'll have margin in my life, I'll have space in my life. But guess what? That's just good old, we've talked about this many times, that's just good old when and then thinking. When this happens, then we'll be happy. When this happens, then life will get great again. The problem is, the when and then thinking, the then never seems to come. Listen, busy people tend to not have busy seasons. They tend to have busy lives. They have one season, busy. It's true. Come on, See, and I knew I'd be talking, some of you are gonna doubt that point. You're thinking, no, I'm just in a busy. Quit lying to yourself. You're always busy, aren't you? If you're a busy person. It's one of the myths that we believe. Seasons aren't busy, people are busy. Number 3, these things are so important. How many go it's so important what I'm doing. The problem often is that things that are important to other people somehow get put on our plate, right? So somehow we allow people to transfer their urgency and it becomes our emergency. And the problem becomes my problem. And it's not my problem, it shouldn't be my problem. When we're running on empty, everything seems to be important. Isn't that true? Everything. We don't have a good perspective. So what's the truth on this one? The truth is life is about priorities. Life is about priorities, and not all things are equally important, right? Yeah. I think COVID affected our busyness, as I mentioned. Why? Because the number 1 priority for people wasn't to stay active, it was to stay alive. Now, whatever you believe, regardless of what you think about shutdowns, at least in the beginning, most of us chose to be less busy because, we felt like we needed to live. Kind of separates things out a little bit, doesn't it, when you think that way? Think of you, maybe a better example is Ukraine right now. You hear the stories. I remember after just a few days, one guy was being interviewed and he said, just a few days ago, the bars were busy, we were meeting with friends, we were just going about our business, moms and dads were dropping the kids off in daycare, and now we're living in, the subway, we're living in bomb shelters, or leaving the country altogether. And it changes what's important, doesn't it? Somehow there are things that really shape your priorities. It's just a great example. And the truth is, whether the COVID war, it doesn't take that. I mean, we'd like for it not to take things like that to help us realize. But listen, when we get to heaven, there's one thing, and I share something like this in most of the memorial services I do, but there are going to be when you get to heaven, you're going to see that a lot of things that you thought were really important in this life were not as important as you thought. It's just the truth. For all of us, when we get to heaven, we're going to go, oh. And the problem for some people is that there are going to be some things that they thought were very unimportant that are essential. And that's the ultimate wake-up call, which is why we all need Jesus. So as we come to the end of Luke chapter 10, what we see Jesus talking about today, when it comes to priorities, what he's talking about in the midst of all of this dramatic stuff that's going on, he's talking about the most important priority. What he's talking about is the most important thing of all things. So let's go ahead and read it. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. It says, now it happened, reading the New King James, it happened that as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. There's several just great lines here, great just statements that the Spirit can speak to you. She heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care? There's another one. Do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed. One thing, he says, is necessary. And Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. So what does it mean to sit at Jesus' feet? Let's look first to try to understand that, because it's clearly the call here in this short story. Let's look first at Martha, who doesn't sit at Jesus' feet. Martha, the reason she's upset is seen in her question, don't you care? Now, Jesus loved this family, Mary, Martha, Joseph, Lazarus. We're not sure exactly why. They had a history together. But first of all, you see the heart he has. Martha, Martha. That wasn't just a repetitive phrase in Semitic language when something was repeated, especially a name. It was language that meant magnification. It was a magnification of feeling. Like in the Old Testament, after the death of his son, David went, Absalom, Absalom. Jesus wept over Jerusalem, said, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And Jesus on the cross is the greatest example where he said, my God, my God. Now, in every one of those situations, they wouldn't have been casually saying that. Oh, Absalom, Absalom. There would have been tears. Jerusalem, 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 my God, my God. Profound heart in that expression. Jesus is showing great love for Martha. Martha takes charge. She's the leader, as I talked about. It was her home. She was probably the financial leader of the family. But she's distracted by her busyness. And it's all for Jesus. It's all in serving. But she has set all the activity that in doing that, it has squeezed her devotion of him, really. And so what are the signs of being a Martha? Let's look at a few of these. Number one, inner turmoil. Inner turmoil. There's two Greek words here. Well, there's two words that are used, worried and upset, that Jesus used to describe her inner state. And the word worried is a Greek word that means to be torn to pieces in many different directions. And the word upset means to be tossed along. It was used, like for instance, in a boat that would have been capsized and was just kind of floating down the stream out of control. And so it's like Jesus is saying to her, you're worried and upset. Martha, you're not in control. You're always the one that's in control. You think you're in control. On the outside, you look to people like you're in control, but really you're not on the inside. You're not in control. You have an inner unhappiness. You have an inner disharmony. Why? Because you feel like you need all these things. For Mary, one thing was needful. For you, 30 things are needful. And it's killing the life within you. Number 2, she's irritable. Because she's in disharmony on the inside, she's irritable on the outside. She's irritable with Mary. She's irritable, in other words, with people who aren't helping her cause. People who aren't on board, helping her get where she wants to go. Helping her get what she's decided that she needs. And so she's irritable with people. Number 3, she's doubting and questioning God. Lord, don't you care? Lord, don't you care? By the way, God can handle us doubting. You remember the guy who said, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Jesus still delivered his son from the demon. So God can handle doubts. But a lot of times, here's what I've noticed over the years. There are a lot of people that just quickly go to questioning God when something goes wrong in their life. It's just like too quick. It's just like, Lord, why did you allow this to happen? Or why is this going on in my life? It really wasn't, in other words, it's revealed it wasn't their plan for their life. And as God has either authored it or allowed it, we don't, sometimes he does one, sometimes he does the other, but it just throws their whole faith world into turmoil. Because it's not wrong to say why, but it is not healthy or mature to not come to a point in your faith where you make a decision, essentially, that regardless of what happens in your life, you've already received more than you deserve. You're going to heaven. Until you get there, you have the Spirit of God living in you. And meaning and purpose, if all you can do is sit home and think prayers for people in your life that you love, and you have no ability to do anything else, you and I have been given more than we deserve in this life. But see, a lot of people don't live with that we don't live, and it's not easy. I'm not saying this is easy, but a lot of people are just, and so that's why I say they're just so quick to go there in terms of questioning God. He can handle doubt, human doubt, but it's revealing of us when we're always asking the why question. I like when somebody said, why me? And somebody said, well, why not you? Why not me? It's a good question. So she doubted and she questioned because she was upset because she was doing it all for Jesus. But if she was really doing it, think about this. If she was really doing it for Jesus, then when Jesus didn't give her what she wanted, that being Mary's help, okay? Jesus didn't respond to her in terms of giving her what she wanted. He didn't say, Mary, would you please go help and finish preparing? That should say something to her, right? That proves that she's not doing it all for Jesus. She's doing it for herself, because if Jesus wanted all that done, he would have made sure it got done. Does that make sense? What he's revealing is that she's not really doing her serving for him at all. She's doing it for herself. And I got to tell you, there's just a lot of times in my life, and I've seen it in a lot of people, that we think we're doing things for God when we really aren't doing things for God. We're doing it for us. I didn't give you all this to do. It's like Jesus is saying, you gave it to yourself. Martha, you made these non-negotiables. And now it's tearing you up on the inside, tearing up your relationships, and you're mad at me because I'm not giving it you your way, and it's really your fault. Now, he's saying it with great love, but that's what he's saying. I didn't give you those things to do, but you have made them needful. You have made them non-negotiable. You have made them necessary parts of life for you to be at peace and for you to feel purpose. And the question for us is, would Jesus say that to you and me? Are we a Martha? At times I am. Let me just set you free. At times we all are. At times we all are. We can appear to have it all together on the outside, but really we're in disharmony on the inside. So let's talk about Mary for a minute. That's Martha. What does Mary do? She gets down at Jesus' feet. What does that mean? Well, again, in the Bible, when things were put at the feet of someone, like you remember in the book of Acts when the disciples sold land, different people sold land, and they put it at the disciples' feet. Or in the Bible when it says, God says at one point, I'm making the enemies a footstool for your feet. It meant to put something under a person's authority. And that's what this is referring to. She was bringing her life. It's a focused time, a submitted time. Submitting really to Jesus, but to the word of Jesus, to the words of Jesus. That's what she was bringing her life in submission to. And Mary's amazing. Mary, in John chapter 12, we see that Mary's the one who was at the dinner in Bethany that she anointed his feet for the burial. That was this Mary. And, Jesus, do you remember what Jesus said in response to that? Because all the religious people were really mad about it. He said, no, she's prepared my body for burial. Now, apparently, Mary, there's no indication anybody else knew that that's what was going on at that point, that Jesus was about to die, even though he had mentioned it many times. He had said it many times on his way to Jerusalem, to the cross. And yet it's Mary, apparently, as far as we know, that really got that most important message. Where did she get that? Sitting at the feet of Jesus. Sitting at the feet of Jesus. Amazing person. So again, we're asking the question throughout this series and then today, because this is such an important, small but significant story in the lives of the disciples. Again, what would the disciples have seen? If you were one of the disciples, and by the way, dinners like this, the disciples would have been there hanging out too. What would they have learned? What would they have observed? If you were one of them, what would you have taken away from this event in the midst of all the dramatic things? And then now we have this. What the disciples would have observed and learned, I think, are four really important things. Number one, prioritize the significant over the urgent. Prioritize the significant over the urgent. Mary was able to sit at Jesus' feet because she was able to separate the significant from the urgent. Let me ask you, what do you think Mary was doing before Jesus got there? Do you think she was sitting on the living room floor, like with the headphones on, eating Twinkies, while Martha was busy with all the preparations? I doubt it. My guess is that she was busy as well, helping Martha get ready for this really, it's important that Jesus is coming. But at some point, she stopped the urgency. At some point, she went and sat down. Martha refused to do that. But she stopped preparing for Jesus, and she experienced him. The urgent had to stop so that Mary was able to sit and to connect with Jesus, engage with Jesus, listen to Jesus. So don't miss those moments. It's got to be one of the great lessons that comes out of this. There's a point in life when preparations become what? Distractions. And so they become distractions from what's going on that's really, really important. So prioritize the significant over the urgent. Number two, prioritize spiritual preparation over physical preparation. Now, I know all of life is spiritual, but for the sake of this point, let me make that distinction, if you will. But there's a time to prepare for something physically. There's a time where stuff needs to get done, right? In our lives, our work, and our families, whatever. But there's also time to stop and to prepare spiritually. For me, Christmas is a great example of this. I was thinking of this because I feel this every Christmas Eve. Every Christmas Eve in our services for so many years that we've been doing these. Because we all get busy, month of December, there's all the hustle and the bustle, the decorating, the baking, or at least running to Costco to get what you need. There's the buying of gifts, the wrapping of gifts, there's all the busy activity. And then usually by Christmas Eve, not always, but usually by Christmas Eve, we all come together with people that we love. And what do? We focus on what Christmas is all about. I love that. I love that. What are we doing? We're sitting at Jesus' feet. We're singing carols that we all know. We light candles and we pray and we reflect and we worship. We celebrate that Jesus Christ has been born into our lives. At some point, at least for most of us, just apply that to your life. At some point, the physical preparation needs to be done. And what it's all about in life needs to emerge and become your focus. At some point, the physical preparation in our lives has to be submitted to the spiritual. Number 3, prioritize healthy self-reflection over self-absorption. This is kind of hard to figure out how to say it, but prioritize healthy self-reflection over self-absorption. And I think the disciples would have gotten this in the encounter, the exchange between Jesus and Martha. Jesus, and the example of Mary, but Jesus loved Martha as well as Mary. We know that. And Jesus was inviting Martha into this, she would have been invited into the same intimacy of relationship as Mary. But what did she have to do? She would have had to first humble herself and realize that her serving was more self than humble service. It was more about what she needed than what he needed, what Jesus needed. And I do think the disciples would have made note of that. There are times in our service, but see, we've got to humbly be willing to take a look at that. But why are we doing what we're doing? Sometimes it's really for us. And we got to deal with that. We've got to deal with this thing called motive. Nobody has a perfect and pure motive. I don't believe that. I don't believe that there's, for human beings, that we have perfectly pure motives. I don't try to even get there. They'll just wear you out. But we need to continue to, as the Lord shows us things, don't we? Be willing to lay those things at his feet. And then the fourth and final one is prioritize the eternal over the superficial. Prioritize the eternal over the superficial. Years later, I like to think that when Mary and Martha would have been reminiscing about this, remember that time when we hosted Jesus? Remember that time that he was in our house and we had the dinner and man, it was just such a great time. I'm sure that was a meaningful remembrance for them both years later, but my guess is that Martha, I think undoubtedly, would have acknowledged, Mary, you made the right decision. I wish I would have done what you did. I don't know if regret is the right word. That's probably too big a word, but I'll bet you it would have been easy for Martha to say, sitting at Jesus' feet was the right choice. That was really the right thing to do. Jesus said, what did he say? Mary has chosen the good part. And then what does he say? Which will never be taken away from her. She made the eternal choice, not the superficial choice. She made the choice that years later and for eternity would be remembered and would not be lost, could never be taken away. Not so much for Martha, but for Mary. For sure, it's true. I think in the midst of all the dramatic, miracle-working ministry of Jesus, the fact that this one short story that's found in no other gospel is super, super significant for disciples today. I think it would have been for the disciples then, and I think it's important for disciples now. So what about you and me? I mean, what about us? I find it somewhat troubling that Jesus let Martha give herself to lesser resolves that looked outwardly commendable, but revealed inner anxiety and trouble until Martha finally said something. Does that trouble you? That troubles me. That he allowed her to do that until she brought it up. We should not assume that we're giving ourselves to the best things and that Jesus will tell us if we're not. We can't assume that. If we're not communing with him, if we're not spending time with him, it's likely that we need to go to him and we need to come to him and be in submission and to be open and to be humble and to be listening, to put ourselves in that place. So are we willing to do really the three, let me just put in simple terms, three simple things that Mary did. Are we willing to sit? That means to slow down and to surrender. Surrender the authority of our life to him. Are we willing to sit? Are we willing to listen? What is Jesus, what is the Spirit of Jesus saying to me today? I've told you many times, if I could be with every one of you this week, that's the most important question I could ask you. What's the Lord saying to you today? Because that would tell me, whatever would come out at that point would tell me a lot about where you're at with the Lord. And then the third thing is, are you willing to choose? To sit, to listen, and then to choose the needful thing. In other words, to prioritize the one thing that's most important in your life. What is that for you? It's many things for all of us are really very important, but the one thing that's most important is to sit and listen to Jesus. Let's pray.